Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. There's geography in my Bible, right? And that is not throwaway language. Think about what that means. Jesus is going from where we're going back down here in a bus. So this is going to take him a couple of days at least to go from Nazareth all the way down here to the baptism site. Probably the better part of 4 days now that I think about it. So he's going to come all the way down here. And John, so far as we know, was also baptizing in the northern part of this drainage system. So why would Jesus wait to go and get baptism when he has to walk longer, right? Does that make sense? So Jesus could have accessed John farther north. He's baptizing near Aenon, near the ford at Adam. And here we have him saying, no, I'm going to wait and I'm going to walk all the way down here to Bethany beyond the Jordan to be baptized. That's looks a little weird and in that sense intentional. He wants to be here. John tried to deter him that when he gets here, John says, I don't need to be baptized by you, and I need to be baptized by you. You need to change my mind. You need to reorganize my thinking. I don't, and you come to me. So John feels like, I am the forerunner, you are the successor. The transition between Jesus and John is occurring. Another transition is occurring down in this area. And John is terribly concerned that people are going to think Jesus is trying to make himself a follower of John rather than seeing John as a follower of Jesus. Jesus replied, let it be so now. It's proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness. Little hard to decode that. I'm going to say it's the right thing to do, John. I think that's what he's saying. This is a divine plan. It's the right thing to do. And as soon as Jesus was baptized and went up out of the water. So Jesus is down in this water. I love him. Jesus was down in the water like everybody else. I mean, you realize Jesus is not the only one here. There are hundreds of people. People have come from Jerusalem and from the surrounding area, walked through the wilderness, right? Walked through the wilderness to get here in order to listen to what John was saying. And when they were convicted, they said, we want to change. We want to transition. We want to metanoeo. And John says, okay, here's the baptism that is a marker of that change. As soon as Jesus was baptized and came up out of the water, at that moment, heaven was opened. Now, this hadn't happened before. Heaven opens. The Spirit of God descends like a dove and alights on him, and a voice from heaven says, this is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Jesus did not need to change his mind about anything. He did not need to metanoeo, but he needed to transition. And I see this then as yet another transition that occurs here. For 30 years, he's been up in Nazareth, where we're going to be at the end of the day. And when he's up in Nazareth, he is leading a quiet life in this small, isolated village. He needed to transition into a time when he was going to be holding himself out publicly as the answer to the world's problem. The one that was anticipated in the Garden of Eden, that was spoken of to Abraham, that was spoken of to David. He needed to identify himself as a part of this formal plan of salvation. And this transition point, where we've seen so many transitions in the past, becomes a transition point for Jesus. The Spirit descends on him in the form of a dove. The Father makes it absolutely clear, this is my Son. This is the one. This is the one I've told you to be waiting for. Listen to him. And from this moment on, Jesus goes public. That's a huge transition in the story of salvation, a huge transition into Jesus' life. And if you think about it, it is the culmination of all the transitions that we've observed occurring in this place before. Now, all of those events are kind of sprinkled, those transitions are sprinkled across Hebrew Bible, and so we are inclined to not see them as related to one another. But you see what happens when we put them on the same geographical point? We suddenly see these things in relationship to one another, and we see that there's a common denominator to them. Whether it's Moses transitioning into glory, Joshua transitioning into the leadership role, Israel transitioning into the promised land and a new stage in their mission on earth. Elijah transitioning into glory, Elisha transitioning into the leadership role, John the Baptist, the new Elijah, transitioning into his role where the earlier Elijah went up, and now Jesus shows up. How many more clues do we need about what Jesus' baptism is about? It is about a transition, a formal transition from the quiet life in Nazareth to public ministry. He did not need to be changed, metanoeo, like other people did who came here for the baptism, but he needed this moment to mark that transition point between the quiet life in Nazareth and the public ministry that gets him. Good. Thoughts, questions about that?